All right, welcome everybody to this talk today. So I have with me two amazing speakers. Number one, Jim Martin from Shepley and Bulfinch. And Jim is one of the pioneers in using AI in the AC industry. Jim was showing us some of the cool stuff behind the scenes. Like, oh my God, the world needs to see this. And we have Chris Parsons all the way from Knowledge Architecture. It's amazing technology that Jim built for the AC industry, and we can't wait to show you how it works today. Chris and Jim, welcome. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Jim?
Hi, my name is Jim Martin. I'm the CIO of Shepley Bulfinch. Shepley is a firm of about 200 people. We've got 5 studios, and we are working in a hybrid manner. Um, I've been here for about 12 and a half years or so, and I run all the technology, and we try and do some innovation on the side. And we've been very interested in AI. I don't know that I would say that I am this huge pioneer, but I am pretty good at using tools when presented to me and finding interesting and useful novel ways of using them.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that. And let's go all the way to Chris.
Sure. Chris Parsons, founder and CEO of Knowledge Architecture. Knowledge Architecture is a software company based here in San Francisco. We work exclusively with AEC firms. We build intranet and AI search technology to help firms do more effective knowledge management. So we've been in business since 2009. We've worked with Shepley Bulfinch since 2014. And before starting the company, I was a chief information officer and an IT director in 2 different architectural firms here in San Francisco. So building knowledge management stuff and intranets was harder than it should have been. So started the company to help address that.
Thank you so
Very good.
much. Yeah. And let's add you all up in here. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Mehdi Nourbash. I'm the CEO at Yegatech, and we help architecture, engineering, and construction company to develop AI strategy and governance. And we have an AI summit coming in on April 22nd to 25th. Full disclosure, Knowledge Architecture is one of our gold sponsors, and we're thankful for having Chris and his team attending the summit and showing off the technology. And we thought, when I saw the knowledge architecture, I said, well, the world needs to see this, and this is what's happening today. All right, so let me start with this question, and talking a little bit about how do you see AI impacting the way that the architecture firm works. Let's go to Chris.
Yeah. My lens is knowledge management, as I kind of mentioned before. So what I think about is, that firms just have tons of institutional knowledge. So design standards, lessons learned, best practices, and historically that knowledge has lived in like 200-page long PDFs or long videos buried on servers or intranet posts or learning management systems. And even in the case of synthesis, where that can all be centralized in one place, like the state of the art for search has been using keyword search. So it required kind of guesswork, kind of like playing keyword roulette a little bit. And what you got back was a bunch of different resources. So if you're trying to answer a question, you have to read that long document or watch a long video or maybe take a course to even find out if the answer to your question is in the resource, which that's not great. And it hasn't been great for a long time. And so what's different now with AI is you can ask the question in natural language. So what's the best window to wall ratio? Or how do we mitigate VOCs? Or what standard do we use for wet sprinkler installation? And instead of getting a bunch of resources back, you get an answer back that's synthesized from multiple locations and then provide citations back to intranet pages or documents or videos or learning management content, whatever it is. So what that means is that users stay in the flow of work, right? They ask a question, they get an answer versus taking on a research project, and then they can go back to work and keep doing their thing. Or maybe they explore deeper, but really you don't have to commit to doing that in order to get an answer that you need. And so for knowledge seekers, that's awesome. They get immediate contextual answers. They spend less time searching or bugging experts or hoping that experts are in their office who can help them. And for subject matter experts, it's amazing because they spend less time answering the same questions over and over again, and they have more time for that kind of high impact work that they love. One kind of final thought on this is we have a client in Portland, Bora. It's an architecture and interiors firm. And Corey Squire, their director of sustainability, wrote a book about sustainability last year. Well, he uploaded his entire book to Synthesis onto their intranet. So now that's instantly searchable and accessible in the flow of work to all the architecture and interiors folks that work in the firm. So that's, to me, a great example of expertise becoming democratized and more actionable within a company.
Yeah, just imagine how many experts a company has and being able to synthesize all the knowledge that exists in a company. That's amazing. Jim, do you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, I mean, my crystal ball is probably not any better than anyone else's, but I've been around long enough that I remember when the architecture firm that I worked at the time got its first email address, and when it got its first internet connection, and everyone's very concerned about, oh, does everyone need an email address, and does everyone need an internet connection? And fast forward 25 years, and it's hard to imagine doing our work without email, Teams, Zoom, all the rest of the tools that we have developed on top of internet technology. And I think AI is probably going to do the same thing, but be faster about it, because with the internet, we had to build the internet and then imagine what the things that we could do for it. And then that information had to propagate out to everyone. And there wasn't an internet yet in order for that to happen. And now with AI, the pace of change with everything has gotten so much faster. And the AI tools are becoming more and more competent. Last year, AI couldn't do fingers. This year, it does fingers pretty well in text to image sort of stuff. And it's going to, I think, a little bit of a lag for our industry because so much of the training data was in things that is not in our specialties. But it's not going to take long for us to kind of figure out how to add value for things. And we've found a whole bunch of tools that we actually use on a daily basis have AI being baked into them. I think some are better than others, but the ones that are good are fantastic. The synthesis stuff that Chris has been building is frankly amazing, and it's allowing us to get so much more value out of our 10-year-old intranet than we ever could before. So it's pretty great. There's some really good stuff that you can do even just today to get value out of it.
Yeah, and that's amazing. And for many years in our industry, we've been talking about knowledge management and preservation and all of those things. And with the recent advance in AI, now we are able to do a lot of cool stuff that Chris and his team has been building. Do you want to, Jim, show us a little bit about
Yeah,
how you're using AI today and what's
yeah, that'd be
your,
great.
process for
Happy
that?
to share. So Shepley Bullfinch is 150 years old, and clearly has managed to share knowledge outside of technology for a vast majority of its time. But my time at the firm has been around technology, so that's what I kind of brought to it. Finch is the name of our intranet. It's based on Synthesis, which is Chris's tool. And for the last 10 years, we've been adding information to it. We've been adding updates. We've got a really robust question and answer process that we call Ask Finch. Not all that imaginative, but very functional. And all of the town halls that we have done over the years and all the presentations we've done and all of our bird feeder courses, which is our learning and development stuff, is all kind of in there. But it was kind of a pain to get at stuff. But if you ask AI search now, you can do things like ask it, how do you do a punch walk report? And it'll go through and it'll synthesize the information from a bunch of different sources and it'll give you a summary. And the summary is actually pretty good. The trick is that if something on the summary isn't right or whatever, it brings you specifically to the location of the object, and inside of that object, it'll bring you right to the actual place. So this should bring me directly to the individual recording that we had, and it'll bring us directly to that moment in time where we're talking about that specific content. And you had to know that this information was in this thing, which we try to do with really good titles and other context. But now just being able to have the AI surface it and just say, oh, this is one of the things you're looking for, gives you a summary, which may or may not be enough. And if it's not, bring you exactly to the place in the content where that is relevant. A couple more examples, like how do you do digital stick sets? We have a specific process that we have evolved over time at Shepley, and this is how we do things at Shepley. If a new employee comes along, they may not know how to do a digital stick set the way that Shepley does. And this is how they can kind of go and find it. And again, it pulls information from a bunch of different sources and aggregates it into a summary, which I feel like is going to be good enough in a large majority of the cases, but they can always go through and find the specific place where that stuff actually lives and then get more information if they need to. Another good example is like something as esoteric as how do we work with contractors, which some of our new employees might, or rather newer employees who are more recently out of school and maybe haven't had that experience, not really knowing how to actually deal with contractors. They just got yelled at for the first time, or they're not entirely sure what they're allowed to agree, or they're not sure what they're supposed to be doing in that meeting, that sort of thing. You can ask it a really interesting question that probably no one's written a specific piece of content around. Spelling out how we think about this thing, but it'll pull information from a lot of different sources on our internet about how we've talked about it over the years and just give you a summary of it, which didn't exist before. This is a unique and novel piece of information. The weird thing about it is if you ask it that same question 5 times, you're going to get slightly different, equally unique answers, which is hard as an IT professional to get used to. I'm used to Excel, where if you ask it the same thing 5 times, you get the same answer. Another thing is mass timber. It's like a new technology that we're investing in, and we're investigating and we're working on with our clients. And we've generated a bunch of content and materials, and we've given a bunch of how-to bird feeder courses and those sorts of things, as well as just presentations about different projects that we're doing on things. So it just kind of presents it. The interesting thing is that we have to be careful because sometimes we will share content on our intranet that is not specifically around Shepley. It's like, oh, hey, look at this company did this really cool thing with this stuff, and it's not a Shepley company; it's one of our partners, or it's a material manufacturer, or something like that. So we're trying to find ways of identifying things that are native to us versus things that we borrowed, or a lunch and learn that was done by an outside company at some point. Something that people are very interested in understanding is how much time can I take off. Shepley moved to a self-managed time policy earlier this year, and it has generated a lot of questions. And so as we come up with the answers to those questions, we put them in here, and then the search will just generally generate a summary of stuff, pulling from lots of different places. We did a lot of looking around trying to figure out if it was doing weird things, and it's really good about not doing weird things. The only problems we found were, in some cases, 10 years ago, we put an answer or information into our intranet, which was accurate at the time, but is no longer accurate because we've moved on or changed things or what have you in the last 10 years. Big surprise. So sometimes we have to go through and curate the content, but for the most part, it's really helpful out of the gate, which is great. Same thing with our hybrid policy. Helping people kind of understand is like what is in it for them and what does the firm require from them at the same time. And in this case, it's like we have a lot of documents about this stuff to help clarify all the different things and all the different answers. And it does a really good job of summarizing the content of all those things. Again, it will summarize it slightly differently each time, but we've not found any instances in this case where it's hallucinating, since it's so closely tied to the information that's actually on our internet. It's also great with very specific things where it's like, okay, well, looking for a very specific answer, and it can give you that very specific answer for us. This is an interesting one. So I think there's going to be an evolution in search, as Chris mentioned earlier. Keyword search is what everyone's kind of trained on, thanks to Google. So if you just put in a one-word answer, you're going to get something. But this is a really interesting example, because if you put sketches in Finch right now, or in Synthesis, you get anything that we've said on Synthesis about sketching. Save your sketches, blah, 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 blah. Here's a bunch of sketches. What do people think about this? Interns doing their teach outs, all that sort of stuff. And you get text about sketches, which is really weird. If you look at another tool that we have, which is OpenAsset, their AI tool is really great out of the gate also, but it's also very narrow. But if you do a search for sketches using their AI fancy icon here, you get just images of sketches, which is a completely different thing. So right now, between all of our different tools where we have AI kind of baked into them, you get what those tools were designed to do for you. So in OpenAsset, it's bringing back our imagery, and in Synthesis, it's bringing back all of our knowledge and our information that we've stored in over time. And the tools that we have for our different partners, the people that develop software for us, is great, but there's also things that we're trying to do that don't seem to exist anywhere. Like one problem that we realized when we started sending out invitations to our 150th birthday party was that our contact database hadn't been updated since before the pandemic, because the only process we had as a company for updating that stuff was when we would send out mailings, physical mailings, which we stopped doing the year before the pandemic. So the database had gotten stale over time. So we actually developed a process where Perplexity is a tool. It's a search engine, AI-enabled search engine, which is really good at doing things like identifying whether or not someone works somewhere. So we sent about 7,000 contacts out to Perplexity and then stuck the response back into Deltek as an activity on that record. So, and then we're able to actually tell how stale or how not stale is our contact database. We're doing a whole big project about this, but this is all kind of self-funded and well, not self, but we're contracting with other random people to help us do some of this stuff. And it's a very bespoke and one-off thing that we're trying to fix for ourselves, which may or may not end up being a product at some point. But we're doing a lot of different things. There's our VP of People and Development came up with a really interesting use case to some of our starting bullfinches, our employees are less interested in digging through PDF documents of all of our benefits and other stuff. So one of the things that we're trying is like turn it into a podcast using Notebook LM, which if you like podcasts, does it incredibly well, incredibly quickly. We're still going through trying to make sure that it does all the things that it needs to do and it hits all the highlights. And there's ways that you can kind of tweak the things that you want it to focus on. But we're looking at a lot of different kind of tools to try and figure out what things can add value immediately for our business as we wait for the rest of the crystal ball to clarify and we understand what the long-term ramifications are. It's like, are we talking digital twins? Are we talking AI as an interface for our BIM models? You can interrogate it using natural language in order to get information out of it. There's a lot of really interesting things that are on the kind of the big long distance, but it's hard to know which one of them is going to come true. So we're quietly trying to gain as much perspective as we can to understand what the opportunities are for the technology and then add immediate value into our business so that people looking around and thinking, oh, it's not this scary thing, it's this really interesting, helpful thing that has allowed me to spend more time doing the things that I'm more capable of delivering value with.
Yeah,
So,
you brought a really good point, Jim, about helping people to get over that fear initial, either
sure.
people are overexcited about this or they're very fearful about it, and how we can help them to have a good understanding of what technology is and it is not, and how we can help them to see the value in doing the work. So there are thousands of solutions out there. So why did you pick Synthesis AI search, and how does that help people to see the value of AI in your company?
Well, the great thing was I didn't have to pick it because it was just presented. I mean, OpenAsset and Synthesis AI Search are the two kind of tools that were, I mean, OpenAsset was a little bit first to the game, I think. I noticed them first. They started doing machine vision stuff like 2 years ago, 3 years ago or something. And initially it was okay, but it wasn't fantastic. But it is a thankless task to manually tag images in your image asset database. So using machine language and machine vision to say, okay, show me all of the walls, the green walls that we have designed, or all the photos that have green walls. It can do stuff like that. Small glass conference rooms, whatever. No one's ever going to have tagged those things, but if you're looking for that specific use case, you can find it immediately. And they just built it into the system. Synthesis, exactly the same thing. It's like we had already invested all this time and energy into putting knowledge into this system, and them building AI search, which isn't perfect yet, and it will be way better 6 months from now than it is now. But right now, it's amazing. And if we can show people, it's like, okay, well, remember that random post that you made 4 years ago, that's the only one that we have on that subject. Well, now anyone who's looking for it can just get it served up for them and then summarized with the 5 different things that were spoken about in various topics at town halls over the years. It's unlocking so much value, and we really didn't have to work hard for it because Chris did all the hard work for us. We do have to edit our content. Yeah, Chris and his team of amazing engineers did all the hard work for us.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I don't think there is one single company, in our industry and outside that doesn't have a search problem. So it's a search that, it's a problem that everybody has. And synthesizing that data and knowledge exists in the organization is critical. So Chris, tell us more about synthesis and, what influenced you to make it?
Yeah, I mean, I think from the AI stuff, we had re-platformed the product and taken it to the cloud and moved it off of SharePoint and into our own CMS. So that was like a massive re-platforming project, and we didn't have any roadmap after finishing that big project, kind of carved out, because we wanted to let the technology settle and see what happened. And so what I ended up doing is what I do a lot of the times is I did a listening tour, and I ended up talking to about 75 of our clients saying, okay, Synthesis 6 is done. That was the new version. What's going on in your companies? What are your business challenges? What's going on with technology? How do you think we can help? But more generally, like, what's going on with your business, and where is there any opportunity to do better with knowledge management? And the two themes that just like blew through everything else were AI. So this was the spring of 2023. So ChatGPT had just set the world on fire. And then learning management. So we're building a learning management system. We're building an LMS into the platform. Again, bringing more of that high quality firm-wide knowledge into search. But the AI piece, it was like, okay, nobody told us to build AI search. They just think like, you guys are smart. You care about AEC. Like, you'll figure something out. And I just really took a long time thinking, the way that we talk about knowledge management, it's helping your firm make the best use of its knowledge. You think about Shepley Bulfinch with 150 years and going of experience, and then all of these different markets and experts in different locations. There's just so much knowledge inside of Shepley. So like, what's the best thing we can do with AI to help Shepley Bulfinch and other AEC firms make the best use of their knowledge? And just search just seems so obvious. Like, we have had a long history trying to do a really interesting kind of federated or enterprise search across multiple different platforms like Deltek and Uninet and OpenAsset and Zendesk, and bringing all that into one place. But it just felt like I had started using Perplexity. That was kind of the thing that flipped the switch for me. It's like, oh, I see. This is what search is going to be now. Inside the company, outside the company, this is what search is going to now look like. So we immediately just pushed all of our AI chips into AI search because it just became clear that would just change everything for firms. So that's kind of how we chose to build it. And the fun part we're working on now is I think about developing AI a lot like developing a person. Like, think about it like AI search for us is version 1.0. It's kind of like having a junior employee, and really good at like a couple things, like really good at this general knowledge-based search, but not so great for like employee search or project search. So right now we're working on making the employee and project search like super robust and taking advantage of those integrations into the Delteks and Uninets and OpenAssets of the world, to be able to answer questions like, who is the Rhino expert in the firm, or who is a registered architect in Illinois, or who can help me with a drone survey? And to be able to cut across all that content like Jim was showing, videos, PDFs, posts, pages on the internet, but also tapping into the structured knowledge in those outside databases, and AI being smart enough to know what knowledge to use to answer which questions. So the AI nerds call that orchestration, right? And that's what we're building, is this kind of orchestration layer. But it's really exciting to just keep pushing on that edge of like, you've got this great knowledge. How do we use AI to help connect the person to the knowledge, or the person to another person within the company that can help them get smarter, solve their problem, whatever the thing might be.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that, just build on what you're explaining, um, every single AEC company in this space has one, two, three, handful of people that are super experts in their field and been doing this for 40 plus more years now. With these capabilities, now we are able to create that. I don't want to say the digital twin, but a replica of them in the company, so that we can start asking, okay, how, let's say George, how does George will critique this? What's George's point of view on this? And being able to scale the knowledge of super expert people in the field in a way that we weren't able to do before. So that would be one of the really interesting use cases to see in the upcoming years.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
Yeah, we've
one
got
that
to
both Jim and
digitize
I are
George.
actively. Yeah, we're both working on this. Yeah, and I think there's kind of two pieces, and maybe Jim, you want to chime on it too. Those experts are also super busy and have some of the highest bill rates in the company, and so asking them to write down what they know is really, really tricky. And so there's this whole field in knowledge management called critical knowledge transfer that involves interviewing the folks, and I can go on and on and on. Like, that's a whole thing. But what I think Jim and his team have been doing for a while now, but now AI just totally changes the game, is like making those videos available. Now that's all searchable. Like, all those
Yeah.
transcripts of all those videos. So if I want to find something that one of their experts did, or the way they answered the question, I mean, Jim, you can speak to some of the work that you're doing there.
Yeah, it's like the Georges of our firms are amazing, but they don't even know what they know and don't know anymore, because they've gotten so much expertise that they can't remember what it's like to not know all the things that they know. Um, so we've done a bunch of different stuff to try and help mitigate that. But generally speaking, if you have to spin up a completely separate process, that's going to be a really hard road to hoe. Um, what we try and do is try and figure out how to create opportunities in the way that we work and in the processes that we work to capture that stuff. I think of data as artifacts of our business process. And if you can figure out ways to put a net underneath your business process and capture data as the business is going about doing its thing, and it's ideally no more work for anyone, um, that's like the holy grail. If you can find those opportunities, then you can do all kinds of cool stuff with them. And we've been doing that for a lot of years. And the AI stuff is going to be the thing that helps us weave them all together and create substantial value out of all that activity.
You guys
It's
do,
not,
like Jim, as an example, your town halls are like really, really rich with information about project stories and employee stories and experts. Like, there's so much, again,
yeah,
that's in the flow of work. That's not like a new process outside of that. And you guys have done a
yeah.
great job of capturing that.
Sometimes you've got to manually move 400 plus videos from one platform to another in order to make sure that they're available. Yeah, so these are the things you have to do in order to take advantage of these opportunities.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's well worth it to have done that, because now it's like that stuff is available for you whenever you need it, and all of the things that you can do with it are not knowable. We continually amaze ourselves with, oh, that was for free, and it wasn't for free. It was a sunk cost. We already paid for it a while
Mm-hmm.
ago with the time and energy we kind of put into it. But there are so many unexpected benefits from doing the work that we get to take advantage of now, which is always so fun to point out. Just make sure to write it all down, because at some point someone's going to ask you, and if you don't have them because you've been too busy enjoying the moment, you need to have a list also.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jim, as a leader in the industry, as you think about these opportunities that are coming in, how do you make a decision on which one should be built, or which one we should buy off the shelf? What's your thought process on that?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I absolutely have been having conversations with all of the people that provide us with software who will talk to me, and not all of them will, um, about like help me understand what your strategy for this stuff is, and this is where value from my perspective would be. I try to be an active customer, because if I can articulate where value is to our partners, then they can be more effective at providing value. And if they can then go say, oh, hey, I have this client who said this would be valuable. Would this be valuable to you, to 5 or 6 other customers? Then, and they get a consistent answer back, then they can start investing with confidence in building that capability. There are some things that I shop around and just no one's interested in. And then at that point, I have to decide is like, is this just me? And am I crazy? And if I decide it is just me, but I'm not crazy, then I will consider building, and I will also build for the purpose of creating a minimally viable product. So if I can demonstrate value, I will tinker around with things. And when I say I also have a team, and they are way more capable than I am. But they'll generally, with some argument, do some things that I'm asking them to do. So we create mock-ups and we create other kinds of things, and they're intended for validating a use case, or because not all of my ideas are good ones, and not all of my team's ideas are good ones. So we have to figure out which ones have legs and which ones don't. And sometimes we build something and we're like, this is fantastic. This is so cool. No one's ever going to update this, and no one's ever going to pay for this, and no one's ever going to want to build this. And then we have to just wave and let it kind of go in the background. But sometimes we find something that's like, this is really cool. We should try and find someone to operationalize this. And we try and do that. And we try and have a network of people that we know who can do these things for us. And that's how we would build something and then maybe hand it off to someone else who's more capable of keeping it, giving it life in a long-term thing, because Shepley is not big enough to have a lot of computer support, computer devs kind of around us all the time. So it's difficult for us to keep a product rolling for a long period of time. There's a lot of overhead involved in that.
Yeah.
So partnering is a great way of getting something done, but we are where the rubber hits the road. So we know what things are problematic for us, and if we can notice those things and figure out, oh, this might actually be something that we could use some help with, then I think that's where good software starts.
Absolutely. And Chris, you've been in the shoes of the CIOs in the industry, and now you're on the other side. So what's your thought process and recommendations to other executives in AEC to make a build versus buy decision?
You know, Jim spoke to one of the most important pieces. I mean, I should take a step back. I feel like this question's super important in 2025 because all these new tools are coming out to make it easier to develop software, or at least build prototypes. Vibe coding and all that kind of stuff is happening. And I think what Jim pointed out that I'm sure is, I know because I know Jim's history comes with some scar tissue, is it's not all about getting to the prototype and showing something that works 75-80% of the time. Like, if this thing is going to become an operational tool for the business, the majority of the effort goes into operations and maintenance and browser versions update and new security protocols. And I can just go on the list of like all the things you have to do if you support a platform. But I do think like I would only just kind of I would say for us, having partners like active partners like Jim is critical. Like somebody told me once that in order to innovate, you have to have innovative clients. Like that's just required, because Jim's right. Like, yes, I was a CIO, but that was 15 years ago. Like I'm not in the day-to-day business anymore. And so like our clients are really good at raising which issues matter and which ones don't. Our job in product is to listen to all of them and kind of distill what things rhyme across firms and what things really move the needle. But if I were in practice, I would be thinking about, Mehdi, you've got like a nice thing in your book about this, about the kind of like scale of problems. And so I'm going to speak off the cuff and you tell me where I got it wrong. But basically, you've got things that are something that might just be a solution that's just for one project, like a project specific. We can assemble a solution, maybe with AI, that can solve that problem. Or maybe it's something that's just departmental, or maybe it's just something that would only ever apply to Shepley or some other firm just because of the way you guys work. And then you get into things that like this is a general industry technology that would apply to hundreds or thousands of firms. And then above that, I guess you've got technology that's like, I don't know, Teams, which is cross industry. It could be anywhere in the globe. And so I think AEC firms should be investing in those first couple of categories, something that's project specific, something that's departmental for their for kind of firm specific. In general, I think that's a good thing to invest and build on because you may not have to own it for that long. Like maybe it kind of comes and goes with the life cycle of a project. And maybe it being 75% is actually good enough because it doesn't need to integrate with a bunch of platforms and it doesn't need to solve all these conditions. And you don't need to get it SOC 2 certified for security because it's a departmental tool or a project specific tool. So I think thinking of that both how big is the problem to like how interested in you are in owning this problem for 2, 4, 5, 7 years. Like that's the way I would kind of get into it and to try and figure out where to make investments.
Yeah,
I gotta say,
absolutely.
I have built my own internet in a former life, and I have really enjoyed the experience of not having to do that this time around, and just being able to figure out how to drive value and adoption of the tool. I don't want to know about the different website version, the web page, the web browser versions and compatibilities and all the rest of the fun stuff. And it's like, and there's no way that I could have built AI search into the damn thing. So I love offloading that and then just focusing on how do we make sure that it adds value to the business, because that's where me as a CIO, that's where I'm doing my best work for Shepley.
I think one thing I would say though, this is a category of things like, and Shepley brought it to mind. Their team is super smart about Power BI, dashboardy, business intelligence, analytics kind of stuff. I do think that that's an area where there's so many good off the shelf tools now that like, I don't know, you guys have upskilled enough to be able to really do compelling work with those tools. And that's something that like, I'm not going to name any vendors by name, but like many people try and like, this is the dashboard you should use to run your firm. But firms are so different in terms of the way they calculate profit or just like there's so many variances. So that seems like an area where like it's super smart for firms to invest, and it's going to be hard to buy a solution that's going to work, would be my take.
Yeah. We're about a year into a very obnoxious migration to Microsoft Fabric. It'll be our first data lake, and we're doing it just so that we can start pulling all of our data, which lives in a bunch of different places, in one place, so that we can do dashboards with it. And also because that's where we think AI is going to start popping off for us. Once we can start to give it access to all of the stuff that we have, then we can start asking it much more interesting questions. But that's a longer journey than I was kind of hoping it was going to be. The trouble with getting skilled is you start to understand all the things you didn't know that were even a thing, and then you just have to keep digging in.
Yeah. We used to live in an era where your databases had to be structured and things like that. And now with all this AI advancement, now it becomes the access and how do you have access to the data, and how are we producing the data in the company? Are people informed about the importance of data? Because the companies of the future are the ones that really leverage the technology, the AI, with the data that they have. And they really should be emphasizing more on the importance of data in their organization. The time went by really fast, so maybe 1 minute. Any final thoughts or anything that comes to your mind you want to share with the people?
Do you want to go first?
Anyone who's kind of experiencing the fear response for AI, I think it just takes a calm hand, and you don't need to profess to know everything, but focusing on what's in it for them and what's in it for the firm is always a really good thing, and try and find some kind of early wins. The thing I always ask people is like, think about the things that you would love for an intern to do, but you wouldn't want to ask them to do it. Anything that kind of hits that list is probably something you could consider trying to get AI to do for you. And if you can do it, then people will be like, this is great. This would have been disrespectful to ask another human being to do, but as long as you use please and thank you while you're doing it with AI, you'll be fine.
I want to pick up where you left off, Mehdi. I think that knowledge management isn't new. Humans have been managing knowledge for millennia, but like really the kind of field of knowledge management is kind of mid-90s is when it really took off. And there have been multiple eras of it. And I think that firms in our industry, like a Shepley Bullfinch, have invested in knowledge management and have pretty good data. I mean, everyone could always be better, but like for the firms that have invested in knowledge management, AI is just such an easier jumping off point for them. There's other firms who haven't invested in knowledge management and they haven't captured much, or their data is not really maintained. And I think the thing that's kind of exciting about this moment is that AI can actually expose that very quickly. And
It
you
can
can
also help
find
with that.
out, yeah, it can help you exactly
Yeah.
understand what's missing. And then, you need to prioritize, once people start getting into knowledge management, their eyes go like super wide and they realize how much knowledge there is and how much they haven't been doing. And then they kind of freak out and then they want to fix it all at once. And I think the key thing there is to just connect it back to your business strategy and understand, if our firm is prioritizing design quality, then you're capturing knowledge around kind of design quality. If it's around marketing, then if it's around employee, whatever your kind of business drivers are, that's where you should focus your knowledge management efforts. And I think you would agree, focus your AI efforts, right? Because the same thing, it's like there's whatever, how many AEC AI tools are there now? Like 500, 600? Like it's just insane. But like to cut through all that noise, it's like go back to your business strategy and be like, what are we trying to move the needle on? And then find either knowledge management or AI or both strategies that can help support it. I feel like that's I don't know, my kind of closing thought.
Yeah, and that reminded me of Vince DiPafi, the CEO of SSOE, that always talks about if your AI strategy is done right, your AI strategy is the accelerator of your business strategy. And if it's
Right.
done wrong, you have something here as like AI and strategy, and somewhere there as a business strategy. They don't really talk to each other.
You've got
And
AI Island over here, just
yeah,
doing
Yeah.
for
whatever it's doing.
what? Yeah,
Yeah, for what? Right.
yeah. And
That
one
same
thing
thing has been
that,
with IT for years.
yeah.
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 One thing that I want to close off with is, something, Chris, you mentioned, and I deeply believe in, that, in order to innovate, you need to have innovative clients. And this is what we are seeing, two of you here. And my encouragement and invitation to all people who are listening today is that go and scan your client base and figure out what percentage of your clients you identify as innovators
Hmm.
and forward-looking and visionaries. And if you have none, so better start to finding new clients that want to partner up with you in pushing this industry forward. Because if you have none and you got stuck with some clients that they don't want to move forward, we all gonna stuck. Yeah, so my invitation is just to um, talk to your executives and think about who are the better clients to work with, and so that we can all push this industry forward.
And
Thank
then
you.
spend as much time as you possibly can with those
With
clients,
them.
just
Yes.
immersing yourselves in their world. Like, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Love that. All right. Thank you so much, Jim and Chris. It's been a pleasure. For those of
It's
you
great
who
to be
are
here.
still with us, we have an AI Summit in San Francisco in April 22nd to 25th. We have a networking event. We go to NVIDIA's headquarters to see what's behind the scene in the world of AI. We have a full day AI Summit with lots of amazing keynote speakers. And we go to Napa Valley for wine tasting and strategic planning. No, I should say strategic planning first, and then wine tasting and lunch and lots of
The
great
order is important
activities.
there.
Yeah. um, Hope to see you all there. Thank you so much again for this
Thank
amazing
you, Mehdi. Thank you,
discussion.
Tim.
And
Thank you,
yeah,
Mitty.
bye
Thanks,
for
Chris.
now.
All right.
Uh,
Bye.
bye.